Most people believe aging is something that simply happens to them, that one morning they will wake up and their body has decided to slow down. After more than 30 years practicing medicine, I can tell you that is not how it works. I am Dr. Javier Morales, and I've spent decades watching what truly separates people who age well from those who decline quickly. Aging is not random, it is not inevitable in the way most people think, and it is certainly not equal. Two patients can be 75 years old, same decade of birth, same country, similar access to care. One still walks confidently into my office steady on his feet, clear in his thinking. The other needs assistance just to sit down safely. Same age, completely different bodies. That difference is not luck, it is not fate, and in most cases it is not genetics, it is daily behavior. Habits so ordinary that no one questions them. Habits repeated thousands of times. Habits that quietly weaken muscle, disrupt metabolism, fragment sleep, increase stress, and slowly strip away independence. What concerns me most is this: the body does not warn you loudly. It compensates, it adapts, it absorbs damage for years, until one day it cannot. Today I want to show you 7 silent habits that accelerate that process. 7 patterns I see again and again in patients who believe they were aging normally. And before we finish, I will give you 3 simple actions you can begin tomorrow to push back. Some of what I am about to say may make you uncomfortable, but if you want the next 10 years of your life to be defined by strength rather than dependence, this matters. Let us begin. Habit 1. Silent muscle loss. From lack of resistance. The first habit that accelerates aging rarely feels dangerous. It does not cause pain. It does not trigger alarms. It simply removes strength slowly and predictably. After the age of 60, the body begins losing muscle mass at an increasing rate. Not because something is wrong, but because that is what happens when muscle is no longer challenged. In medicine, we call this sarcopenia. In real life, it looks like difficulty standing up from a low chair. It looks like hesitating before climbing stairs. It looks like reaching for support where you never needed it before. Muscle is not about appearance. It is your insurance policy against falling. It stabilizes your joints. It absorbs impact. It allows you to correct your balance when you stumble. When muscle weakens, the body becomes fragile. And after 70, fragility changes everything. What concerns me is how quietly this happens. Many of my patients believe they are active because they walk every day. Walking is excellent for the heart, but walking alone does not provide resistance, and muscle requires resistance. It needs tension. It needs to push against weight, even if that weight is your own body. When that stimulus disappears, muscle tissue gradually shrinks, balance declines, reaction time slows, and one unexpected fall can begin a chain of events that is far more serious than most people imagine. Habit 2. Chronic low protein intake. The second habit feeds directly into the first. As we age, our bodies become less efficient at converting dietary protein into muscle. This is known as anabolic resistance. In simple terms, the same breakfast that maintained muscle at 40 is no longer sufficient at 70. The body now requires more protein to achieve the same repair and rebuilding effect. Yet what I consistently observe is the opposite pattern. Protein intake decreases. Breakfast becomes mostly carbohydrates. Lunch becomes light. Most protein, if any, is consumed at dinner. The problem is that the body cannot store protein for later use the way it stores fat. When large amounts are consumed at once, only a portion is used effectively for muscle repair. Protein is not only about strength, it forms the framework of bone. It supports immune function, it contributes to hormone balance. When intake remains chronically low, muscle loss accelerates, recovery slows, and resilience declines. Muscle that is not challenged weakens. Muscle that is not fed shrinks. Combined, these 2 habits create the foundation for frailty, and frailty is rarely reversible once it advances too far. Habit 3. Prolonged sitting without interruption. The third habit looks harmless because it feels normal. Sitting. Most people associate physical decline with inactivity in general, but the real danger is not simply how much you sit, it is how long you sit without interruption. When the body remains still for extended periods, circulation slows, blood begins to pool in the lower body, glucose remains elevated longer after meals, oxygen delivery to the brain subtly decreases. None of this feels dramatic. You do not experience sharp pain, you do not collapse, but internally the body shifts into a less efficient state. What many people misunderstand is that exercise does not fully cancel this effect. A morning walk is beneficial, but it does not erase 10 uninterrupted hours of sitting. The body does not average behavior across the day. It responds to what is happening in the moment. When sitting stretches beyond 30 minutes at a time, metabolic changes begin to accumulate. Over months and years, this pattern contributes to insulin resistance, vascular stiffness, and progressive weakness in the muscles that are no longer being activated regularly. In my practice, I often see patients who consider themselves active because they exercise 3 times per week, yet they spend the majority of their remaining hours seated. Over time, that imbalance shows up in balance tests, endurance, and posture. Movement does not need to be intense to matter. It simply needs to interrupt stillness. Habit 4. Chronic underhydration. The fourth habit is even quieter. As we age, the brain becomes less sensitive to thirst signals. You can be mildly dehydrated and feel completely fine. No dry mouth, no obvious discomfort, just subtle strain. Water is not optional fuel. It regulates blood viscosity. It supports kidney filtration. It maintains joint lubrication. It allows the brain to function efficiently. When hydration remains chronically low, blood thickens slightly. The heart works harder to circulate it. The kidneys compensate for longer than they should. Over time, this compensation has limits. I have seen older adults present with confusion that is not dementia, weakness that is not disease fatigue that seems unexplained. In many cases, inadequate hydration is part of the picture. The danger is not acute dehydration from heat, it is chronic underhydration repeated daily. When combined with reduced muscle mass and prolonged sitting, it creates an environment where circulation, cognition, and resilience all decline together. Again, there are rarely dramatic warning signs, just gradual erosion, and by the time symptoms become obvious, the body has been operating under strain for years. Habit 5. Disrupted sleep and circadian rhythm. Sleep is where the body repairs what the day has damaged, yet it is one of the first things people sacrifice. Many older adults tell me they sleep less because they do not need as much anymore. Others fall asleep in front of the television, wake up at irregular hours, or scroll through their phones in bed under bright blue light. They assume fragmented sleep is a normal part of aging. It is not harmless. Sleep is when the brain clears metabolic waste. It is when the immune system recalibrates. It is when blood pressure drops, giving the cardiovascular system time to recover. Hormones that regulate appetite, glucose, and stress depend on consistent sleep cycles. When sleep becomes short, irregular, or chronically interrupted, inflammation rises. Blood sugar control worsens. Cortisol remains elevated longer than it should. Over time, this pattern accelerates biological aging at the cellular level. The body can tolerate one poor night. It struggles with years of inconsistency. The danger is not feeling tired the next day. The danger is the slow accumulation of damage that no one sees. Habit 6. Polypharmacy, without review. The sixth habit is more subtle because it often begins with good intentions. Medication. Modern medicine has extended life expectancy dramatically, but as patients' age prescriptions accumulate, a blood pressure medication, a cholesterol drug, something for sleep, something for pain, something for reflux, each medication may be justified on its own. The problem emerges when no one periodically reviews them together. 5 or more medications significantly increase the risk of adverse interactions. Some lower blood pressure too much, others cause dizziness, some interfere with nutrient absorption. Combined, they create conditions that increase fall risk and cognitive fog. I have seen patients whose decline began not with disease, but with interaction. A medication added to solve one issue unintentionally worsened another. Another prescription was introduced to treat the side effect. Gradually, the body carried a heavier pharmacological burden than it could tolerate. This does not mean medication is harmful by default. It means medication without regular review is risky. Minimum necessary medication, maximum possible lifestyle support. Without oversight, polypharmacy becomes a silent amplifier of weakness. Habit 7. Chronic stress and social isolation. The final habit does not live in the body, it lives in the nervous system. Chronic stress is not just an emotional experience, it is a biological state, and when that state becomes constant, it reshapes the body from the inside out. In short bursts, stress sharpens awareness. It raises heart rate, it increases alertness. That response is protective. The problem begins when it never turns off. Persistent stress keeps cortisol elevated. Over time, elevated cortisol suppresses immune function, increases blood sugar, promotes inflammation, and accelerates muscle breakdown. It quietly counteracts everything that protects healthy aging. But there is a deeper layer that often goes unspoken: isolation. Many older adults live with a low hum of worry, concerns about health, about finances, about becoming a burden. Children move away, social circles shrink, conversations become less frequent, the days grow quieter. Loneliness is not simply sadness, it is physiological stress. Research consistently shows that social isolation accelerates immune aging and increases mortality risk. The body interprets prolonged isolation as threat, and threat keeps the stress response active. I have treated patients whose physical health declined rapidly after the loss of a spouse or close companion. Not because they stopped taking medication, not because they suddenly developed a new disease, but because their nervous system never fully settled again. Chronic stress multiplies the damage of every other habit we have discussed. It disrupts sleep. It increases cravings for processed food. It reduces motivation to move. It makes hydration and nutrition less consistent. It amplifies vulnerability. The danger is that stress often feels invisible. There is no cost, no lab value that flashes red in obvious warning. Just a gradual tightening of the body and narrowing of life. And over years, that tension leaves a mark. After everything we have discussed, you might expect a complicated prescription. You do not need one. You do not need to overhaul your entire life. You need to interrupt the direction your body is drifting. There are 3 actions you can begin tomorrow that directly counter most of the 7 habits we just covered. The first is simple. Include a palm-sized portion of protein at every meal, not once a day, not only at dinner, at every meal. As we age, muscle becomes harder to maintain because of anabolic resistance. That means your body requires more consistent protein intake to preserve strength. When protein is evenly distributed across breakfast, lunch, and dinner, muscle synthesis improves. This single adjustment supports muscle mass, bone integrity, immune resilience, and metabolic stability. It reinforces everything Habit 1 and Habit 2 warned about. The second action takes less than 2 minutes. Stand up every 30 minutes, not to exercise intensely, not to perform a workout, simply to interrupt stillness. Stand, stretch, walk a few steps, reset circulation, activate your muscles, lower glucose levels, restore oxygen flow. The body does not deteriorate because it rests. It deteriorates because it remains still for too long. This small interruption directly counters prolonged sitting and supports hydration habits because movement often leads you back to water. The third action happens at night. I call it the 10-minute reset. About an hour before bed, drink 1 full glass of water. Then review tomorrow's medications. Make sure you know what each one is for. Finally, place your phone outside the bedroom. That is it. Hydration supports circulation and kidney function overnight. Reviewing medications protects you from unnoticed accumulation. Removing the phone protects sleep quality and lowers nighttime stress stimulation. In less than 10 minutes, you reinforce hydration, medication, awareness, sleep regulation, and stress control. These are not dramatic changes. They are small acts of resistance. And resistance repeated daily reshapes the direction of aging. Before we close, I want to speak to you not only as a physician, but as someone who has spent decades watching people age in very different ways. After more than 30 years in clinical practice, I have learned that decline rarely comes from one dramatic event. It comes from patterns that were ignored because they felt normal. Everything I shared with you today reflects both clinical evidence and lived observation. I have seen individuals preserve strength and independence far longer than expected simply by respecting small daily disciplines. And I have also seen preventable decline unfold because no one explained how powerful ordinary habits can be. Aging itself is not the enemy. Inattention is. That said, it is important to understand that this discussion is for educational purposes. Every individual's health situation is unique. What applies broadly may need adjustment for your specific conditions, medications, or medical history. Lifestyle changes can be powerful, but they should be implemented safely. If you are managing chronic illness, taking prescription medication, or considering significant changes to your diet or exercise routine, consult your healthcare provider before making adjustments. Medication should never be stopped abruptly without professional supervision. Awareness is the goal here, not self-diagnosis. If you step back and look at everything we discussed, one truth becomes clear. Aging is accumulation, loss of muscle that was never challenged, protein that was never prioritized, sitting that was never interrupted, hydration that was neglected, sleep that was disrupted, medications that were never reviewed, stress that was never allowed to settle. None of these habits destroy the body overnight, but together they shape the trajectory of the next decade. The encouraging reality is that the same principle works in your favor. Strength accumulates, resilience accumulates, independence accumulates. You do not need a complete overhaul. You need consistent direction. The body responds to attention. While none of us can stop time, we can influence how we move through it. The goal is not to live forever. The goal is to remain capable for as long as possible. If this conversation shifted your perspective even slightly, apply one small action tonight. That is how trajectories change. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next conversation.